we're absolutely excited to have you. I mean, this is a lot of people for our first workshop. This is incredible, and thank you so much for spending a time on a Saturday afternoon to join us. This is our first workshop. It's called Intro to 3D Printing, and we'll be covering the fundamentals of 3D printing. And if you maybe are a beginner or don't know where to start, this is absolutely perfect for you. And my name is Ankur Shah. I'm the Director of Operations at an NGO called Mycelium. And SPORE is an effort of Mycelium, and you'll hear about that in a minute. But with us, we have our teacher, and her name is Jeanette Blasius. She's the Outreach Director at SPORE and Mycelium, and she has about a decade of experience in 3D printing, so we're very excited to have her teaching us. And Dan Meisner is with us as well. He is the Executive Director of Mycelium, and he'll be going over who we are, what we do, and why we do what we do. So Dan, I'll hand over the stage to you.
Hey everyone, my name is Dan Meisner. I'm really excited to have everyone here and share this month's workshop with you. I'm the Executive Director of Mycelium, which is a 501c3 nonprofit located right here in Huntsville, Alabama. We formed it because we believe in empowering everybody to accelerate the advent of the circular economy using things like technology and education. And so what is a circular economy? Well, a linear economy is one that is a one and done throwaway economy. You use it, you throw it away, you're done. But a circular economy is one where those materials are instead recycled and reused. And so we imagine eventually living in a world where products could be on demand. Like imagine a Netflix of products where you order something and use it, and when you're done, you send it back to be broken down and turned and rebuilt into a new product. So we're really excited about these kind of ideas. And as part of this mission, we've donated a 3D printer to a small local library, bringing 3D printing access to that area. We've also built and donated a 3D plastic recycling hub to a local university at their makerspace so that students and faculty can start turning plastic waste into 3D printing materials. And so everything we learn, we distribute through workshops like these at SPORE, which stands for Supporting Public Outreach, Resources, and Education. And so if you're interested in participating in any of these projects or volunteering or teaching these classes or anything at all, just please send us an email, which we'll have the link at the end of this class. With that, I will hand it back to Ankur. Thank you guys again for coming to class.
So Mycelium, the name itself, means it's a network which fungi arise from, and it's below the soil. Mycelium is a network, and it grows like a network, just like neurons in the brain, and it transfers nutrients from trees to trees and strengthens the forest. The larger the mycelium network in the forest, the more resilient it becomes. And the idea with Mycelium NGO is to do something similar with self-reliance. We want to teach you and skills and develop technologies to accelerate the circular economy, enable people to become self-reliant, and then teach others. Just like a mycelium spreads in the forest, we want these ideas to spread to make a more sustainable world. So a spore is basically the seeds of a fungi. Mushrooms propagate in spores, and we want to do outreach using that acronym SPORE. And with that, I want to introduce again Jeanette Blasius, who is our teacher, has years of experience in 3D printing, and she'll be going over the fundamentals, and I hope you are excited for this. So Jeanette, let's do this. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Ankur. So yeah, as he said, I've been 3D printing for a few years now, and I'd like to share some of that knowledge with you guys. So let's just jump right in. So here's a few of the topics we're going to be covering in this class. First, we're going to start with what exactly is 3D printing, and then we're going to talk about some of the basic 3D printers, since there's actually more than one kind of 3D printer out there. And then we'll talk about how exactly you get started with 3D printing. And then once you do have a 3D printer or you have access to one, how to set up your model, and then some basic tips on how to get started with your printer and getting skills with it. So what is a 3D printer? So what a 3D printer basically is it takes a digital file and turns it into a physical object. as you can see here. And there's this idea where you can take a 3D printer and basically you're replacing a warehouse of parts. So instead of having a warehouse of parts, now you have servers full of files that all you have to do is put the file on the printer when the print is needed, and there's no need for extra space being taken up. And you don't even, in shipping, people won't have to ship parts. You just have a printer at your facility and you just print the part up and it's ready to go. So here's a few examples that some of us have made with using 3D printing. I have, the first one is a face shield. With the pandemic, 3D printing has gone up in popularity tremendously, starting at the very start with making face shields and other PPE to prevent COVID, and just, it's amazing to see the community come together with 3D printing. And then also I've got some of my cosplay up here. I also use 3D printing for miniatures and other models and just geeky stuff to have around the house. In replacement parts, it's, if you break something, you can just fix it. Like here where I broke my fan, the button on my fan, and I just modeled up a new one and printed it and put it back on there, just like new. And so one of these pieces here is a piece that that Dan made, and so I'll run a little video of it and he can tell you about it. You guys are muted.
So all these parts that you see were actually 3D printed with the exception of some motors. So I 3D printed the parts, bought some motors, and then plugged in an Arduino to make it walk. And so I'm kind of interested in adding a 3D printer head to it so it can walk around and 3D print stuff.
So Jeanette, at this point, I want to ask you, what interested you in 3D printing? How did you get into this art?
I definitely got into it for cosplay. I had been saving up. I had heard that they were very expensive. I went to Dragon Con one year and I started asking around how much 3D printers, what 3D printers people had, and everyone told me these crazy, super expensive 3D printers. I was like, well, okay, it's gonna be a long time before I have one of those. And then I joined a community locally and they're like, oh, just get a cheap one, try it out. So that's really how I started. I've been using cheap printers and making parts, and I've got my famous Deathclaw helmet here. It's chroma key green, so it has some trouble, but it's just it's a cool thing. That was one of the first projects that I did. And then I've made a ton of Baby Yodas, and then also I have a liquid printer that I bought recently that I make miniatures, and it's definitely, and then I started with cosplay and it just never ended. I make all kinds of stuff now.
Awesome. That's very fantastic. I'm a beginner at 3D printing. This is probably a best course for me. But Dan, since you've been printing 4 years, what got you interested?
Well, when I first turned an idea into reality, it felt like a superpower. Like really, it was like, wow, oh my goodness, I just turned an idea, something, pulled it out of my head, now I'm holding it in my hand. And it really, like I said, it seems like a superpower. And so I really like the ability to distribute the manufacturing to everybody. So you can imagine something like, oh, I just made this new design, and you upload it, and within minutes, hundreds of thousands of people around the world are actually 3D printing your design so that they can hold it, look at it, and say, oh, look, this is cool and useful. So that, I think, is tremendously powerful. So
Awesome. And the thing we want to mention about 3D printing, it can be a way to empower yourself to manufacture, right? And in the future, maybe we can manufacture most things. We don't need to go order from Amazon, probably, some things. So with that, I want to open up to the group. What got you interested in 3D printing? Just type your chat, answer in the chats, and we'll read it out sporadically. All right, thank you.
Yeah. So let's move on to types of printers. So there are I'm just going to cover the three, probably the most popular types of printers. The first one being, of course, probably the most popular household printer is the FFF or FDM printer. And then there's the liquid SLA printer, and then there's the powder SLS printer. So let's go into some of the types. So this is a basic function of an FDM printer. It has a plastic filament string that goes through the printer, being pulled by gears in either the print head or multiple extruders. And it works a little bit like a hot glue gun. The gears push the filament into a heated block, as you can see here, and it heats it up, and then it liquefies right about here, right before it comes out of the nozzle, and then comes out and it squeezes it out into a pattern. And then it raises it a little bit and then squeezes it out into a pattern, and then does it until you have a fully formed shape that you're ready to whatever function that you needed. So I'm going to go a little bit into some of the types of filaments you can get. I think the most popular, or at least the easiest to use, is the PLA. That's what I typically print in. It's very easy to print with. It doesn't need, it's not really restrictive on the heat temperature that it needs. It's recyclable. It's made from plants, so it's biodegradable, and it's all around a pretty good filament. It's fairly cheap. ABS, I've never really worked in it. You typically have to use an enclosure because, for one, it's very picky about temperature. It's also a little bit non-toxic. So, it is a little bit toxic, and so it puts off a little bit of some fumes, but it's considered stronger. A lot of cosplayers like it because you can use, you can put acetone fumes around it, either with a bucket. You usually put it in a bucket and you raise the piece above it, and the fumes will fuse the outside, so it'll be nice and smooth on the outside. And so it's popular in that regard. Then there's PETG, which is kind of a cross between the two. It's a little bit easier than ABS, but it's almost as strong as ABS. It's a little bit fickle to work with, and it's also non-toxic like the PLA as well. So a lot of the especially like with the safety, trying to build stuff for the pandemic, people have been asking for PET and PLA only. Since ABS is a little bit toxic, people have some, you're not really supposed to have it on your skin. So usually it's favorable. So then a couple of the other types of filament is nylon, which is it's a little bit of a stronger, that and carbon fiber, they kind of have a stronger quality. PEI, and TPU is a flexible filament. It's almost like rubber. Once you finish your part, it's a kind of a rubbery, it gets really bendy. And then there's also composite. You can get metal infused, you can get wood infused. They've even got some that has some iron in it, and then you just expose it to water and it rusts. It literally rusts and looks like something made out of metal and antiqued and stuff. So it's really cool, some of the different kinds of stuff you can use with your printer. So next is the liquid SLA printer. It's kind of the same function, sort of, except it's kind of the opposite. So the way this one works is you've got this vat of photosensitive liquid resin, and it exposes the bottom either draws up with a laser, or it exposes the entire image of each layer in the liquid onto this bed. And so as it raises slightly, it exposes and hardens one layer and makes a pattern until you have a completed part. This type of printing is a little bit faster than FDM. It's definitely toxic, so I'm not going to be making any cookie cutters out of this kind of material. But it's definitely more, the quality is definitely easier to achieve. You can get a much, much finer detail in this filament, in this material. And so let's just watch this video. Watching it just pull this part out of this liquid, just like magic. I actually purchased one of these printers recently. I purchased a very small, very cheap model. It was $125, and it's made, like I said, I've made a few minis. So it's definitely not as far out as I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to be spending thousands on one of these, and it's really cool that I have access to that. Now this printer is more used by companies. This is a SLS printer where it takes, the way this one works is it's kind of like the SLA, except it uses a powder, and it has this piston that rises up and it puts a layer of powder, and then it sears the powder in a pattern, and then comes down, it rolls a layer of powder, it sears that layer, and then layer by layer you have your part. And typically it's made out of metal shavings or metal filings. So you can have a part that is a usable machine part that can be heated. It can be, you know, have a huge load bearing. So this one is used a lot in prototyping for companies, for like machines, cars, that kind of thing. So here's an example of one in work. So it just sears it and then rolls another layer and then sears another. And then when you're done, you've got this gear and whatever this part is that you're ready to put inside an engine and go. So here's a couple of the recommended printers that we'd like to point out. One printer that's been hot this year, definitely the #1 printer this year, is the Creality Ender 3. It's a very small, basic printer. You can get it for about 200 and maybe some change, maybe somewhere between 225 and 250, depending on the functionality and how new you get it. You can get printers refurbished a lot. I think both my printers, 2 of my printers have been refurbished models that I got for a little bit cheaper. One of the printer that I have is the Creality CR10S. It's a cubic foot printer that I got refurbished. I believe I paid $235 for, and it's a workhorse. I've been using that printer for a year, and it's just a wonderful printer. And then here I've got the Longer Orange 10 is the SLA printer that I purchased a few months ago, and it has very good quality. For $125, I regret nothing. It's been pretty cool. And then we also like to show the Prusa. This is the printer that we purchased for the local library here. Pictured here is a dual filament. So there's actually, some of these printers can have multiple colors. So that's really cool that you can have your printer just paint the model for you in a way. You can actually set up your model to print in 2 different colors or 3 different colors, depending on how many hot ends you have. So once you have your printer, you have access to a printer, the next step is to find a file, and then preparing your file and then getting it ready to go. So here's a few places that we typically use for finding files. Thingiverse is usually I think that's most people's go-to. That's what, when people ask me for a part, that I usually give them Thingiverse and say, pick one out and I'll print it. It has a wide database of biofiles. It even has some laser cuts and such. And then there's My Mini Factory, which is a little bit, they're a little bit more limited. They're a little bit more into SLA printing, but all of their models on their site have been tested for printing. So you're not going to get a file that has missing polygons. You're not going to have something that is not well engineered for printing. So I typically, if it's something really popular, I go to My Mini Factory first. And then if you're trying to find something that's really rare, you can try Yegi. Yegi is kind of like the Google of all of them. It pulls it from a bunch of different, even Thingiverse and My Mini Factory. So if you're looking for something really, really rare, you can try there. You can even pull files from Google Earth. I've printed local buildings from from Google Earth. And then there's some art websites like Art Sketchfab where you can go and pull files. Sometimes there's not a lot of them that are actually shareable, but if you're trying to find something really rare, it's good to have a list of places to try and find your file. And if you can't find it, you can just try to make your file. So if you're going to try and make your file, you need to know the two different basic kinds of making a file. There is CAD, which is very strict geometry based. So if you're trying to make something that's going to fit on a part, or if you're trying to replace, like when I made the fan button, I used CAD because it had to be a certain size, and it was very easy to make in CAD. So then there's also modeling, which is more like a sculpting. It's like sculpting out of clay. I use it a lot for making like a figurine or parts for my costumes. It's more of a smooth and textured take on 3D modeling. So if you're going to be doing some CAD, there's a few resources that are free and online that you can use. And one of them is actually one that's been developed by Dan. Dan, would you like to talk a little bit about Orchard?
Sure. So Orchard is essentially a 3D model repository plus a CAD editing tool. So you can think of it like Thingiverse or one of those model repositories with an edit button. And so everything you see on there can be changed and customized and edited and saved, and then you can download it and 3D print it. And the cool thing is that as you edit these models, or as other people edit these models, they actually grow and evolve and change. And as they do that, they trace out this tree of evolution. And so you can kind of see the history of how each model evolved to get there. You can collaborate with people. And it's all totally free for both private and public 3D models. So check out 3dorchard.com. It's pretty cool. But of course, there are a lot of other CAD tools and modeling tools. One thing to emphasize, as Jeanette said, with CAD, you would want to, if you want to make something precise, like an engine or repair something that needs precision and dimension, to use CAD. But if you want to make something that looks a little more organic, like a sculpture, you use 3D modeling. So Jeanette will talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. So the program that I like to use for the modeling type is Blender. Blender is a free program. It's been around for many, many, many years. And it's a little bit harder to use than CAD. CAD is usually very simple. Everything is very direct, where I usually like to compare Blender to like flying a helicopter. It's just, there's a lot of tools everywhere. There's so many different, there's so much functionality in this program. It's a modeling editing, there's video editing. It has so much incorporated in this program. And they recently came out with a new update that changed the interface to make it a little bit easier. And they even have there's a tool inside this program that is the 3D edit, the 3D toolbox, 3D print toolbox, sorry. And it will tell you if your model has issues with printing, like if there's a polygon missing, it'll tell you, hey, there's a hole over here, you need to probably patch that up. So it has a lot of functionality in this program. And one thing that I think is really cool about this program is the company behind this runs a film festival every year. And what they do is they say, okay, guys, we're going to work on hair physics. So that year, everyone will make a bunch of videos that will push the limits to hair physics. They come out with the film festival. They say, okay, this is the winner. What was the problem with hair physics? So then they develop the program to fix whatever that is, and then, or the hair physics that year. And then the next year, they pick a different topic. They pick textures. And so they'll kind of fix textures that year and have a film festival about textures. And so every year the program just pushes the limits on one thing. And so now it is a powerful, powerful tool, especially if you want to get into like animation. It is amazing, some of the stuff that's come out of Blender. I believe actually Ubisoft, that makes the Assassin's Creed game, they're the one video game company out there that specifically uses Blender for their games, or at least a little bit. I think it's really cool that a company would come out and say, we use and sponsor this free program that anyone can use. It's really, really cool. So yeah, you can download it at their website and try it out. And also I have a few tutorials on Blender on our website if you want to check those out. So next we're going to go into how to change your file into a 3D print file. So what you'll have to do is download a slicing program. Most of them are free. So you take your 3D file and you put it in here, and we like to say it slices up your model into pancakes and makes it into the layers of pattern that your printer is going to make. So like I said, there's several programs that you can use. I think the most popular is Cura because it's free and the functionality is easy. It has tons of features that are pretty standard with any slicing program. But I don't really like some of the features. So I also use Mesh Mixer, which is also a free program. I prefer their supports. You see the little trees that are on the bunny rabbit here that help with printing. Theirs are a little bit better than Cura, I think. And then there's also Simplify 3D, which a lot of people prefer because it has more functionality. It has better supports as well. However, it is a charged program. I believe it's something around $175 to purchase this program, but everyone I know that has this program stands behind it 100%. And then there's also Slicer, which I don't recommend for beginners, but if you want to try and mess around with very custom G-code or the kind of files that you're going to be making for your printer, it's kind of cool. You can kind of program your print nozzle to start somewhere else or something like that. So, but I do recommend this for advanced users only. So I'm going to talk about moving your 3D file into a printed file by turning it into G-code using the you can change it by all the different print qualities that you want. So once you put your model into the slicing program, you'll see that usually you get the standard move it or resize, rotate, that kind of thing. So you can sort of modify how you want it, where you want it on your printer, and then you can modify some of your other features for your file. So when you get started, it's good to know the anatomy of a 3D print. So the way a file is it's not actually solid on the inside. It's actually, usually it's hollow with a little bit of filament on the inside. So you've got your top layers and your bottom layers, and then you've got this outer shell, and then you've got your infill. And what your infill does is it kind of keeps, like, you're going to have some pieces that have some, there's some top layers that are going to need some support. So like I make stuff that's not going, like I'm just going to paint Yoda and I'm just going to stick him on a desk somewhere. So I don't really need my infill to be very strong. I keep mine at about a 7%, but I think the standard is about 20%. If you're going to make something that's going to be load bearing, like the button I made or some other things that have a little bit more of a physical functionality, you're going to want to up your infill, or you can change the walls of your print to be thicker. I generally do that. I go down to a 7%, but then I make my walls a little bit thicker. You can make the bottom part more sturdy, that kind of thing. There are all kinds of different ways you can print something. So another thing to keep in mind is when you print your file, it's going to print them in layers, and there's actually a certain amount of space between each layer, and you can control that with your layer height adjustment. And it's great to have a print that looks absolutely wonderful. Your details are there, but if you do go very, very dense, you're going to run your printer for a long time. So in this example, we've got a file where it was very, 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 very small, the detail is amazing, but you're going to wait 7 hours for that print. And I can say that whatever file was used for this was probably a very, very small print, because if, like, I think Yoda here, I printed him about, I think he was about 2 hours, and I printed it him at 0.2. If I had gone less, it probably would have been about 6 hours. So it's probably about like this. It was just a matter of wanting time over quality. Prints that you are going to sand and paint, you can go less. However, the further that you go, the more you're going to lose your structure as well. So you can go to a 0.3, but it needs to be something that you're just going to look at, or you're going to be very careful with, or you're going to cover it with something that's going to make it stronger, because it can what they call delaminate. It can come apart. So it's just something to keep in mind, that your smoothness versus time is a factor when you're setting up your file. And when you put a file into Cura's standard interface, it has a nice slider here that says layer height versus print speed. That kind of helps with kind of understanding that. And then it has the basic infill, and you can put a few more. But this is just the when you open Cura, and it says you can go to an advanced setting, but this is really all you need to know to get started, is your layer height, your infill, and your support and adhesion. So adhesion is important. If your print comes off the bed, it's bad news. You're going to lose the print, or it's going to be, you're going to come into the room and you're going to see like just filament going everywhere. So you can kind of prevent this when you're starting your print by adding a build plate adhesion. So you can start your print with nothing, or what I like to use is a skirt. And what it does is it kind of prints a line around your print before you start. So it kind of, you can start your print, it does it, and you're like, okay, well, I drew a circle around it, so obviously it has to be okay where the print's going. Then if you're printing something tall, you should use a brim, which is basically like a skirt, but it draws the lines all the way up to the print, so it kind of anchors it to the bed, keeping it from coming off or wobbling. Kind of reduces the wobble, especially if you're using like a Cartesian printer where the bed goes back and forth constantly. It kind of keeps the wobble to a minimum. And then there's a raft. When you start, you could use a raft. I think a lot of prints that come preloaded come with a raft, but it's just like a brim, except it does several layers. So it's good if you're having like adhesion issues, like your bed is really warped, or you're having heat, like your temperature on your bed isn't doing very well. So, but it's just a giant pillow of plastic under your print. So I would kind of avoid that if you have to, but it's good to know about your options. And then we're going to talk about supports. Supports are another way to keep your print from failing. So you're going to have files that you're going to have something that kind of goes over. So if you have a print, your printer is just going to print from the bottom going up. So if it doesn't have anything for the plastic to stick to, it's not going to go anywhere. So if you're making your own file, it's good to keep this in mind, to keep 45-degree angles. So then the layers have something to grab onto from the previous layer. If you don't have that option, you can click the Add Supports button in whatever slicing program you use, and it will automatically add the supports to the model. And it helps to just avoid it, because it adds a lot of time, it adds a lot of material. You're going to have this kind of a scratchy area where you pulled the supports off. It's just all around good to avoid it. If you ever print with, but it's always good to check to make sure you don't need it, because otherwise you're going to have what we call the spaghetti mess, where it just kind of goes everywhere, and either your print is going to fail, or you're going to have to redo a part of your part. It's just good to avoid it. So before you go to print, it's always good to go to the preview menu. I believe at least Cura has this. I think a lot of slicing programs have this. it actually has a preview menu where it shows your file just like the printer is going to print it. You can even have it show the extruder nozzle where it's drawing each line, and it has the slider that shows what layer it's on, where it's at, and you can see where, if you have a piece that's doesn't have supports, you can try to draw supports there. Or if it's missing a polygon, it'll just completely remove that layer, and you'll have the print will be here, and then it'll start printing again somewhere about right here, and you'll have this whole area where it's just gonna cause issues. So it's always good to check your file before you go. Then once you have your file all ready to go, you're ready to save it. This is just a recommendation from me. I have tons of files and I have several printers, so it's always good I always start with the print time, because let's say I got to go to work in a few hours. I want to put a print that's maybe 3 hours. So I go through and I pick something that says 3 hours, such, start it, and it's ready to go before I have to go to work. And then I put the printer profile, because it's really bad news if you print on the wrong profile for your printer. You print for a smaller printer on a larger printer, it's just not going to work. Your printer doesn't know that, so it'll try to do it, but it'll have some issues. And then name your file, your material. If you ever modify your print with temperature or anything, it's good to have, if you have 2 different kinds, it's good to know which one. So just a recommendation. So once you have your file, you're ready to go. So here's my CR10S. So the way it's set up is it has a separate printer control box, and above it, it has the filament holder. So here's my filament, and it kind of goes through here. The filament goes into these gears, and it gets pulled on this side, and then it goes into this, what's called the PTFE tube, and it slides through this tube into more gears and the heat box. So, and this is the print head. So then the plastic just comes, it goes all the way through here, loopsy-loos, and into the print. So I don't know if printers will change in the future, but so far the printers that I've seen, when you turn your printer on, the first thing you have to do is set the temperature. And typically it has 2 settings. There's PLA and ABS. Since I typically print in PLA, I go to preheat PLA, and I just start it, and it starts heating up the nozzle and the bed to the preset temperature. You can change this temperature in the file, and you can change it on the printer. Typically a PLA, it runs at about 200 C, and the bed is usually about 60 C. I run mine a little bit hotter because it just is so it sticks better. ABS is a little bit hotter, about 235, and my printer sets the bed temperature to 100 C, and I usually turn it, if I print with PETG, I have to use the ABS setting, but I usually turn down the bed because I think 100 C is a little much. So another thing that you're going to have to do when you start your printer up is leveling your bed. Typically when you start your printer, that's number 2, is leveling your bed, because something might have gotten bumped, or it just has to be calibrated. It's always good to check your calibration, whether you think it might be good or not. So typically there are knobs underneath your print bed that you can adjust. Once you get your printer up to temperature, it's the best time to check your calibration. So your printer will have a calibration setting, so then it goes and it moves the nozzle, and either you run a piece of paper underneath it to check the distance between the nozzle and the bed, or like my printer, I installed a auto leveling sensor, and so it just kind of does it for me. So I go and I hit the calibration button, I walk away, I come back, it's ready to go. So very, very good to check your calibration every time. And then here's a few tips to just kind of get to know when you first start printing. Having extra tools is great. Most of these come with your printer. I believe these snips came with my CR10. They're good for pulling off supports or clipping off blemishes. The scraper tool is for pulling when you're done with your print. You've put all this effort in keeping your print stuck to the bed. Now it's time to pull it off. So it's good to have some kind of scraper tool. having extra nozzles, extra tubes, good to have in case you in the middle of a big project and you don't want to have to wait for it to come in the mail. And then also printable upgrades. When you get your printer, you're going to be very excited because you won't have to buy upgrades sometimes. So you just upgrade and upgrade and upgrade. You know, printing your own upgrades is pretty cool. So so here we have what this is a filament cleaner box. You just clip it on your filament before it goes into the extruder, and it kind of catches cat hair or, you know, any kind of dust and stuff like that. It keeps it from going into the hot end where it might come out the other end, you don't know. So it's always good to have it cleaning the filament before it goes in. And then you want to try and avoid running out of filament. There's nothing that's more stressful than your filament getting a jam in it because you didn't check your filament and you ran out, because then you have to pull your printer apart and try to fish it out either with wires or, you know, somehow cold pulling where you stick the filament in and pull it out. It's not good to run out of filament. And then also bed adhesion aids, glue stick is number one. It's whether you use ABS or PLA, it is wonderful. Just putting down a little bit, if you think you're gonna have some trouble in a certain area, just putting down a little bit of glue stick and it helps your print stick so well. And then if you think that if you're having issues with like the whole bed, using hairspray can work. I use it sometimes. I don't like to use it a lot because it makes my office stink, but it really does help if you're having a lot of issues. I use a glass bed. It works great. Some people use PEI sheets. There's all kinds of different ways, but glass is pretty good because it's nice and clean and it keeps it finished. It puts a really nice finish on the bottom of your print. And with that, that's the end of the class. So I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a few things. So you can visit our website to see some of the other tutorials we've done, and we'll post this video up there too.
All right. Thank you, Jeanette. Now it's time for a question answer session. We have a great question from House, and he asks, what are the environmental recommendations for housing a printer? Are the heat temperatures and potential for filament mess more of a keep it in the garage and in a room with no carpet, or is it safe in a bedroom with carpet?
So that's a great question. So I just print in PLA, and it doesn't really have any, I haven't had any issues. I used to leave it in the living room because I like to just keep an eye on it while it ran, and it never caused any problems. It makes a little bit of noise while it's running. I've read a lot of people complain about the noise, especially now I've got my printer here in my office. So if I'm working from home and I have a meeting, people are like, what's that sound? I'm like, nothing, I'm sorry. So, but if you're running other materials like ABS, you do have to keep that in an enclosure. I wouldn't recommend that in the bedroom or somewhere where you're going to be hanging out a lot, because I've just heard it kind of stinks. It's not really like, you're not going to poison yourself with ABS, but it's kind of like when you're soldering, you want to have some kind of ventilation. It's going to make it stuffy.
So at this point, I think we can unmute. So people who have questions, you can unmute yourself, just introduce yourself, say where you're from, and you can just ask your question. We have some time for that. So I see John had a raised hand, if you'd like to go.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect,
hey,
yeah.
Cool presentation. Thanks for doing this, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for being here.
So I've actually gotten into photogrammetry recently, where you take a bunch of pictures of something and it builds a 3D model of it.
Nice.
So
Cool.
a few years ago, my niece was born, and on the day that she was born, I built a 3D model of her. Everyone else was taking pictures, but I took a bunch of pictures and I built a 3D model of her.
Nice.
Yeah, and she's turning 5 in about a year, and I thought it'd be a cool idea to 3D print her on her first day for her parents. So I was thinking about commissioning it, but you had mentioned color printing before. I'm wondering how viable is it to actually print the texture of her on the actual 3D print with a color 3D printer. Is that even possible right now? Like what is the situation there?
Yeah, so actually I'm not very familiar with that kind of printing. I believe it's kind of like SLS. It's I've seen it. Or did you go to DragonCon? Are you one of the DragonCon attendees?
No, actually, I just searched for 3D printing seminars on Reddit.
Okay.
You guys, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's-
So I can show. It's an inkjet 3D printer.
Mhm.
And what it does is it prints a layer it does the layer. It does the layers of powder, except it runs an inkjet over it. And so what it does, it creates a model. I don't know if I'll be able to find it, just searching for stuff, but yeah, like right here, here's one. So it makes, you can actually print in powder, and
Cool.
it's really popular. At DragonCon in the vendors area, they actually have these people that come and you'll stand on a platform and it'll rotate and they'll scan you in your costume, and then you come back later and here's this action figure of you in your costume. Is so cool.
So this is already being done. So this is possible.
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Cool.
It's very yeah. So
right there.
yeah, so I would look into this this
Cool.
kind of printing.
What is the economy like for commissioning 3D prints? Is there a community that I could look into for having someone do that for me? Is there a website or a subreddit? Or
For specific.
Sorry, you go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, Jeanette. One sec. One thing I want to add is check out shapeways.com. So they have a material called sandstone, and it's kind of like a sandy finished material, but you can get that in full color, all the colors of the rainbow.
Okay.
And then that technology Jeanette was mentioning, they're usually HP 3D printers, but they're made by HP, and they layer by layer basically print just like a sheet of paper, printing a picture on a sheet of paper. They print that layer and then put a new layer of powder on it and print that, and it binds the part and colors it and everything.
Cool.
But I think just the easiest thing to do would be to check out Shapeways and look at their materials and look at specifically the sandstone material. I think that would probably be get you what you're looking for.
Cool.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, you can definitely, all you have to do is upload a file. One thing that also is cool is they just recently got a giant one at Clemson University for prototyping packaging. And this blows my mind. This bottle of whiskey here is 3D printed out of powder.
Wow.
And it's crazy to me. It's that they 3D printed a bottle of whiskey. Sorry?
The whiskey itself is 3D printed?
Yeah, it's just like the color inside it. It's like probably a clear, and they just
like not the actual whiskey though. I was gonna say that would
yeah,
really
yeah, no, that'd be really cool if it was a functional bottle of
3D
whiskey.
printing my own booze in my room.
Who knows? I mean, this is the future. There's a 3D printer pancake 3D printer. I think it's really cool. I've thought about doing this and getting like a pancake benefit where we print Baby Yoda pancakes for the community. It's really, really cool. So yeah, the capabilities of materials is just it just blows my mind.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and John, one other material I will mention is the and how that whiskey bottle or whatever was made was a technology called polyjet is what it's called. So Shapeways also has under their materials, they have called multicolor polyjet. And so you just upload these your model to this website, and then it will kind of tell you how much it'll cost and all that stuff.
Cool. What was the first material that you had mentioned?
Sandstone.
Yes,
Sandstone.
it's here at Sandstone.
Gotcha.
And then,
All right, great. I'll look into that. Thanks for answering my question, guys.
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I see Gennaro Tina, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. You have a question about, do you print directly from the software or save it to a flash drive and print locally from a printer's controller?
I put it on a mini SD because you can print directly from the computer, but if there's any kind of network issue or your printer goes to sleep or something like that, your printer is going to stop. It doesn't have any information coming in. But if you put it on a card and you put it in the printer, it'll go. You can shut your machine down. There's no issues. So I recommend going with that option. There are a few advantages to printing from the printer, such as like remote printing. You can be at work and be like, well, my printer's not doing anything. Let me put something on there. So, but it's not very likely. But
So I'm not sure, Jeanette, and it might have just been on our end. It kind of cut out a little bit of that, but just to emphasize, if you have your print running from your software and your computer decides to update itself,
yeah, it'll stop the print. So I think we lost you guys. So let me go to the comments too.
Aren't there some that like have a resume kind of feature though, that if the power is cut or something?
Yeah, so like the Prusa that we showed in the demo, that's the one we gave to the library. We actually tested that. We had it running a print, and then we pulled the cable. It just said powering down. It shut down. Then we plugged it in on the opposite wall, and it heated back up. It went back to home. It heated back up. It kind of ran some filament to kind of get it going again, and then you hit resume, and it goes right back where it was. I wish my printers did that, because I live out in rural Alabama, so I have frequent brownouts. So my printer I'll be sitting there watching TV, and the printer or the power will go out, and I'm just like, no.
How much does it cost to print each one of your prints about, just in terms of material?
So for PLA, just printing a basic PLA part, I usually charge anywhere from, if somebody's asking me for something, it's usually about $10 for something pretty big. The filament, the actual roll of filament is about $20, give or take. So you can get a roll of filament for about $20. That usually lasts me at least a month. Of just solid printing.
So losing a print is more losing time than it is losing material.
It sure is. Like, really, the material itself is the least of my concern. Like, it's just the time I put in to setting it up, to getting it printing, and then having it print it's the frustrating part that, now I just lost 8 hours.
Right.
Especially when you're a cosplayer or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, now the con's in 3 hours.
Yeah, I know. Like, especially like if this were a normal year, I would be like, okay, guys, I gotta go. I got a costume I'm working on. I gotta get my file put on here because it's August.
Like, well, if I do 3 hours of cardio today, I might have almost abs by December.
Yeah.
I know people who bring their 3D printers to Dragon Con, set them up in their hotel rooms, and have stuff printing while they're out on the floor.
Yeah, I went to a room party, and like we go in, and they've got 3 sewing machines, and they're making like, what am I gonna wear to the masquerade tonight?
I definitely bring my sewing machine, but
yeah. I've never been quite that dedicated, but I have worked on the costume. And I remember I was watching the parade. I'm sitting there like sewing as I'm watching the parade.
Yeah.
I run a photo shoot in a parade section, so I can't really do that in the morning of the parade. But
yeah.
I used to run a track, and they wanted to put it all in the back of our track room, and I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Too distracting, too loud.
Yeah. No, I did go to I'm a nerd. I went to a 3D print intro, or not an intro, but a demonstration at Con, and they had printers there. They had this giant. It was called a hang printer. And it's this giant, like 20-30 foot printer that used fishing line to pull the print head, and it would print something like just super tall. And
cool.
It was really, really interesting. It was so cool seeing different kinds of printers and getting to nerd out with other 3D printers at Dragon Con. I'm hoping like somebody will bring back. They had a 3D print meetup, and it was really cool to meet up with 3D printers. But then they didn't do it last year, so if they don't do it again, I'm gonna be like, hey, can I put this on the thing? Because it's really cool. Just go.
Yeah, I've been trying to get a maker's track started up forever, because I ran another track for 7 years and I'm done with that. But I've been trying to get a maker's track going for a long time for Dragon Con leadership. So I think it would fit in nicely.
Yeah, I think, are you in Atlanta or are you outside
Yeah,
of it?
yeah, I'm actually in Atlanta. I used to run the Whedon Universe track there, so
Oh,
for
okay.
like 6 years. But they are bad need of a makers track, hardcore.
Yeah. So I don't know what track it was. It was in the Sheridan. So, and I think they had
Yeah.
other sort of similar, and that's where I went to that 3D print one where they were talking about the hang printer. And it was
Yeah.
actually the local makerspace in Atlanta that was running it. So I don't know if you
Yep.
know those guys, but they
I do.
were running that track. So yeah.
I am those guys.
Oh yeah. So yeah, maybe I was there. I was there with the big bone
One of
hat. So
Yeah.
I was. So I went to that panel. It was really, really cool. It's definitely inspiring to meet other makers and stuff. So let me open the comments. Did anyone else had questions?
I think there's one question.
There's it.
Yeah, you read that? When grabbing a 3D file from one of these library websites, what software do you normally use to prep the file for the printer and material you'll be using? What are some things that you must look at to make sure the file will print correctly?
So I use, let's just show here. I use Cura. Cura is typically what I use for when I download a file. It's typically your file is going to be an STL, stereolitho file, but it can be OBJ. I think it has a few different types of file it can be. But anyway, you put your file in here and you can set it up, and then you save it, and it's if I want to build different kinds of supports, I don't. Yeah, here's Mesh Mixer. I put it in a Mesh Mixer. Let me do that. Grabbing a file from the library. Let me try to. Do I have something? I think I do. I have a file here. I can try to just put it real quick. If you guys want it, are okay with it, I will throw a file in here. This is something that my husband asked me to print a long time ago, and I haven't done it yet. That's the one unfortunate thing about Cura is it takes a million years to start up, but there we go. So let's just drop. So he sent me this from Thingiverse. It gave me a zip file of files, and now this file here is not for print. It's just going to be a 3D model, but you just drop it right in there, and you've got this file sitting in there. And I can rotate it. I don't know if other 3D or slicing programs do this, but you can actually lower it below the bed and just print from there up. So let's go to the preview menu. This is really helpful if you have a failure. So if you print something that's 8 hours and the power goes out and you've still got 8 more hours, you can go in here and you can have it print the other half.
Or you can make a hollow one.
Do what?
You can make a hollow one.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So now you will have to like drill it out because it puts I don't know if it'll show that. It'll put a cover. It'll, if you make it this way, it'll put a solid layer there. But yeah, so this is the preview menu, and I can go, and it basically shows it printing. And you can see the infill. It has it color coded here. So you've got the yellow infill, you've got the inner wall, the outer wall, and then you've got the top. And another thing to watch since I'm here is if you've got a very steep angle, you have to be careful of your inclines at the top showing the inside. So if you've got like a very steep incline, but you have your walls really, really thin, you're gonna see like some kind of pinholing where it's got too much. There's not enough wall there between to kind of cover the shelves. So you gotta be careful of that kind of stuff happening too. All right. So I see here it says what CAD software I use to make the button. I used Orchard. I use 3D Orchard. It's really easy to use. The whole reason that they made the software browser based is to kind of simplify it. So you just go there and you draw your shape and you extrude it and it just makes a file. And we can do a workshop on Orchard sometime. We have a few, they have a lot of tutorials on their page. And I believe we have a little bit on our page as well, but they're very responsive. If you message them on on the website, they'll respond pretty quickly. So
All right. With that, it is 2 p.m. But I guess one quick last question is from Stacy. Where did you buy your 3D printers, and where do you suggest starting for beginners?
The Creality Ender 3 is, I think, probably the number one right now. I've had at least 2 or 3 people email me saying, hey, is this a good printer to start with? And I say yes. And it's very popular right now. It's almost hard to get your hands on them right now. It's probably gotten a little better than earlier. I know in April it was almost impossible to get your hands on one. I got my Creality CR10 on eBay. It was a refurbished CR10S, and it was great. It was absolutely ready to go. It probably had a little bit of blockage, but one good, like I mentioned earlier, a cold pull, where the cold pull is where you put the filament in when it's still hot, and then you let it get not too cold, but it's still not all the way up to temperature. And so you let it get to that, and then you just yank it out. And when I did that, it was like, it pulled like 3 or 4 different color filament junk out of it. So that was the problem with the printer, I guess. So I got $100 knocked off just doing that. Getting a refurbished is great. You can get refurbished, probably, I think Creality's website probably has some refurbished you can buy. I think a lot of people buy from Alibaba. I don't know. I've never bought from there, but I've heard it takes a long time to get your stuff. So Amazon sells them. I think some other, I think Walmart even sells printers now. Reselled from somewhere else.
All right, Jeanette, thank you so much for doing this. And for those who want to get involved, please do sign up at our email list on sporehs.org/get involved. We will be sending you an email with all the links. And we are a nonprofit. We make time to make these workshops. We rely on donations. If you want, you can donate anything. We'll really appreciate it at sporehs.org/. It's in the chat. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you for spending this hour with us. And, I hope you learned something new. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
guys. Really appreciate
Thank you.
Hey,
Really appreciate this. Bye.
absolutely. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.